Digitizing Delmarva's heritage and traditions. Today, we're in the home of Hamilton Phillips Fox, and he's going to tell us about a wonderful and full life here on Delmarva. Mr. Fox, nice to have you recording this for history. And we've been looking forward to this for so long, so thank you for inviting us into your home.
Glad to have you.
I guess the best place to start with someone's history, rich history, is the beginning. Tell us about the early years of Ham Fox.
Well, I moved to Salisbury in the 1920s when my father came here to serve as pastor at Salisbury Methodist Church.
So your father was a United Methodist minister.
Right.
Yeah. What was his name?
Same as mine, Hamilton Phillips Fox.
I see. Well, that's easy to remember. Yes, sir. And in those early years, you went away to school?
Well, I went to elementary school here. Actually, Mrs. Harrell's School was where I went to school.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, that's a picture of the little teeny photograph.
Yeah.
That is a picture of students at Mrs. Harrell's School.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah, but a lot of prominent
oh, yeah, Todd Greer's in that picture, and Bob Cannon's in that picture. Bob Heatwell's in that picture. I can't remember all of them. But
Boyd Williams, did Boyd Williams, I know he went to that school, but maybe he's a year or two younger than you. But
I don't know, I'm anyway. 80. How old am I? 88.
Well, Boyd Williams is not far behind you, but we're not here. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Boyd Williams. So you went to Mrs. Harrell's School, and from there you went to?
Well, my father was transferred to Lincoln, Nebraska.
Oh, my land.
As a Methodist minister. In Lincoln, Nebraska. That's quite a move.
That is.
And after that, he was sent to New Jersey, Ocean Grove, New Jersey. And from Ocean Grove, New Jersey, he came back to Salisbury.
Oh.
And stayed in Salisbury 4 or 5 years, and then went to New Jersey. Oh, he went again to Baltimore. And then he came from Baltimore back to Salisbury again.
Good grief.
He served 2 terms as minister at Salisbury Church. So,
like a lot of Methodist ministers' families, you moved from charge to charge, I guess you would call it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Now, how about, you mentioned Front Royal, Virginia. You went to school in Front Royal.
Yeah, I went to Front Royal as a prep school.
Prep school.
Around American Academy.
Oh, yeah.
Prep school.
Yeah.
And
is that where you were introduced to fox hunting?
No, well, in prep school, they had an arrangement if you wanted to ride a horse, why, you could go down to the Army Remand Station, which was located at Front Royal, and they'd put you on a horse, and if they didn't throw you off and kill you, why, they said that kid can ride.
So obviously the horse you were on didn't kill you. It might have thrown you off.
It may have bounced me off a time or two, but it didn't kill me.
Was that your first exposure to George S. Patton?
Well, George S. Patton, my exposure to him was during World War II. He was in the invasion of Sicily, and we went on an invasion thrust near Salerno in Sicily, and we put General Sherman tanks on shore in that invasion.
So you were in the Navy?
I was in the Navy, right?
I see.
And after the invasion, it was a minor skirmish. It wasn't a big deal. After the invasion, Patton came down aboard my ship to thank us for the help and cooperation and so forth in the invasion. And so that by our efforts, we'll be in Salerno tonight, and that was just.
Now, what was your capacity, Mr. Fox?
I was a lieutenant, senior grade in the Navy, and I was a skipper of what we call an LCT. That was a landing craft that could put 5 General Sherman tanks ashore. We put our tanks ashore and went on back with the invasion part, and eventually we went back to England, and the war ended, and that was that.
Oh, that was a big day, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, it was.
So you then came back to the United States and eventually got out of the Navy pretty quick, I guess.
Right.
And had you already graduated from law school at that time?
No. I went back to the United States, and I forget went up to England, and that's when the D-Day occurred. We were I was in the D-Day invasion, and
so your boat was part of the Armada, I guess.
Right, exactly.
And your job mainly was to take equipment up to the shore. Is that the tanks?
5 General Sherman tanks.
5.
I could carry 5 General Sherman tanks, and if you put your 5 tanks ashore, why you picked up survivors or whatever needed to be done, and you went back to the English coast.
And got the heck out of there.
Right.
Good grief. Well, that was quite an experience. And there were quite a few Salisbury, Wycomco County guys who were involved with D-Day, were there not?
Yes, there were.
Yeah.
Yes, there were.
You came back. Where did you go to law school?
Well, I started law school before the war.
Oh.
And the war came along, and I was, like so many of the flowers I used, nipped in the bud. And I'd done 2 years of law school. I came back and finished law school and came back to Salisbury to practice law.
Yeah. And who'd you practice with when you came back here?
Ernest Clark.
Mr. Clark.
Yeah, Ernest Clark. And the firm was called Clark and Hearn. Charlie Hearn was in the firm at that time.
Yeah. It happens that you, Mr. Fox, are mentioned in the famous book, Stephen Ambrose's book, D-Day, June 6, 1944. And on page 382, and I'm going to read a little excerpt from this, it's talking about a fellow named O'Neill. Did not think so much of Phillips' executive officer, another ensign who was a kind man, but in battle he became literally paralyzed, unable to give orders or even to move. The third officer, an Ensign Fox, was an absolute joy, bright, brave, and cool. He would do anything for him. His father was a Methodist bishop, his mother president of the Women's Christian Temperance Union in Maryland. He, meaning Ham, would dutifully pass around the temperance literature his mother would send, then lead the march to the nearest pub. He would point to himself as living proof that a minister's kids were the worst in town. And then Stephen Ambrose goes on to tell this rather grim story. This is during D-Day. On the LCT, the gun crews were firing their 20 millimeter guns into a bluff. So far as O'Neill could tell, we were the only U.S. offensive activity in that area. Even the tanks were sheltered behind the sand dunes, unable to fire over them. Our orders had been to land, retract, and return for another load, but instead we stayed and continued to fire. The executive officer cowered in the hold, but Ensign Fox led O'Neill and others ashore to bring wounded men to the LCT. He quotes, "We filled our bunks, our inside decks, and every available space on the main deck. The wounds were gross. There was one medic and our cook to tend to them all, and we did our best using our inexpert hands as well as we could." What a interesting story that is. It's in Stephen Ambrose's book, D-Day, June 6, 1944. Well, peace finally broke out in Europe, and you came back to the United States. Were you then offered the opportunity to muster out of the Navy, or what?
Well, I wasn't offered to muster out, but I was shipped out to the Pacific then. That's when they gave me the choice of either going to the Pacific or mustering out.
Well, you said they gave you a choice between Norfolk, Virginia, or the Pacific, and
Yeah.
what was your answer to them?
Well, they were going to put me on night shore patrol, and I said, "No thanks." I said, "I know I'll get killed in Norfolk, but I get a better chance than that in the Pacific, so I'll take the Pacific."
So you picked up a boat. What kind of a boat in Chicago?
LST.
LST.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to take
LCTs and LSTs.
LST. And
we took that ship from Chicago down the Mississippi, Missouri River, the Panama Canal, and back out to the Pacific again.
And you were the skipper of that craft.
Yeah.
Finally, World War II ended, and Ham Fox returned to Maryland. And you've talked about you had to go another year to law school, I guess.
Yes.
And you came back, and was it Charlie Hearn? Or no, it wasn't Charlie Hearn that you went practice law with. Who was it you practiced with?
Well, it was Ernest Clark.
Ernest Clark. I'm sorry.
But Charlie Hearn soon joined the firm, and it was Clark and Hearn for a long time.
And then eventually it was Hearn, Fox, and Bailey, wasn't it? The three of you practicing law together.
Right.
Yeah. Good grief. And so you practice law, and then there's a picture we have of Judge Bailey swearing you in as the state's attorney.
Right.
How many terms did you serve as
Two.
2 terms as state's attorney?
8 years.
Now, during all this time, in your spare time, you're developing an interest in fox hunting. How did that all come about? Well, first of all, tell us, you actually got on horses, you mentioned, in Front Royal, Virginia.
Yeah.
And I think you said you at least saw General Patton at that time, did you not?
Right, that's right.
And what was that? What was the occasion?
Well, one of the invasions we went on in Sicily, after it was over, General Patton came aboard my ship and to thank us for our cooperation and so forth in the invasion that had just gone on.
And you mentioned to him that you had seen him one time before in Front Royal,
I said,
Virginia.
"You don't remember me, I know, because I was a snotty little kid, but I fought behind you in Salerno."
Introduce the subject of fox hunting here on the Eastern Shore.
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk about the 3 guys that kind of got that organized into more than just a loose organization. It was you, Charlie Habliston, and Bob Williams.
Bob Williams.
So the three of you decided that you wanted to revive this tradition. It's kind of a Maryland tradition, isn't it?
Well, yes.
Yeah. So how'd you go about doing it?
Well, we rode and hunted in this part of the county, and we got to talking about it and decided to try to put together a group of 9 or 10, I think it was. We decided to seek recognition. There's an outfit called the Masters of Foxhounds of America, and you apply to them, and they will recognize you as a hunt if you meet the necessary requirements.
All right, we're talking about the early years before you were actually sanctioned, I guess,
That's right.
by the Hunt Club of America or whatever it was, Masters of America. And we have a photograph here, an early photograph that remembers those years. And there's a few folks in there who, I guess, get together and had an interest in riding horses. Is that?
Yeah, or they meet freely on Saturday or Sunday. There's Joanne Hinman, Richard Carey, Dickie Carey. I'm not sure who that one is. Lee Laurie, Etta Bloxham, and Emma Christensen.
Uh-huh. And I think Hamilton P. Fox is in that picture, isn't he? Also.
Yeah, he is.
And who's this guy, Hooker Furbush?
Well,
Tell us about Hooker Furbush.
He's a real character. He was the whipper. He was the huntsman for the old Wycomco hunt that was started in the 1930s.
Oh.
And he was a huntsman for Glenn Riddle, the Riddle farm.
Oh, really?
And when Riddle moved his hounds to Salisbury, Hooker came to Salisbury too, and still took care of Hooker's hounds.
Huh.
And started the hunt that ultimately became a Wycomco hunt.
Did you ever meet Mr. Riddle?
No.
But he worked. This Furbush worked for
Right.
Mr. Riddle.
Right.
I guess he was just in residence part time here in Maryland anyway, I guess. Well, who is, you talk here about, I guess this is during the period when you were trying to get accreditation, and you talked to a Mr. Hubbard from Chestertown.
Yeah.
And what was the occasion here? Were you trying to convince him that you all were for real, or what?
Yeah. We wanted him to, he was a yes or no man as far as being recognized. And I went to see him in Chestertown, took a horse and hunted with him, and he decided he could recognize it. And we then started our own hunt.
I see. Now here's a picture of you and the hounds. Where is this taken? Tell us about that photograph.
Well, this is when I was hunting the hounds, and I'm in the kennel with the hounds, and they're milling around. The huntsman has to spend as much time as he can with the hounds because they're supposed to come to his call and listen to what he teaches them and trains them to do. And this is with me in the kennel with the hounds where I spend a lot of time with them.
Were those kennels on this property, Mr. Fox?
They're still on the remnants. They're still back there.
Oh.
That's me standing on the ground.
Well, what is the blessing of the hounds? The priest.
It's a little ceremony. They say a prayer for the hounds and say the hunts and the riders and so forth, and amen, and get on your horse and go away.
And this begins the season, so to speak?
Right.
Is there any prayer for the fox at all?
Oh, yes. Yes,
it only seems fitting that,
Yeah.
that the fox should be. And this is a great picture here, I think, of you. Tell us about that horse.
Well, a little bit about this horse. If you'll notice these horses' feet, there's one of them is on the ground. 3 feet are in the air, and one of them is the ground.
Oh,
That's the
my.
way a horse really runs. Artists for years had argued about whether a horse ran 2 feet in front or 1 foot in front or what. But very seldom do we catch a photograph where he's got only 1 foot on the ground. But that's a shot where he's got 1 foot on the ground, and that's the way they really run.
Well, it's an absolutely beautiful horse. What was his name?
Frontman.
Frontman.
Frontman. That's him up there.
And it's, oh, okay, that's a painting. And that's the same horse that's in this picture.
Yes.
That's Frontman there. That's a good picture of Frontman. But this one is Frontman in action,
Yeah.
with his master, Ham Fox. So that's a great picture there. Well, so eventually you became accredited.
Yes.
And then it was I guess you had an annual season.
Thanksgiving to Easter.
Thanksgiving to Easter.
Traditional.
Well, I guess then there weren't any crops in the field, so
Well,
to speak.
it was getting bad then. All the farmers were planting their rye and their wheat and so forth. And it's getting worse all the time.
Here's a picture of your home.
Oh, yeah.
And the horses and the hounds and everything in the front yard.
Yeah.
Is that the beginning of the hunt one season?
Yeah, that's right.
So there had been the blessing of the hounds, and then you all would take off cross country over around Pemberton Drive, or
Right.
yeah. And there was another site. Was that out Spring Hill Road around
Well, that's Dick Laws's farm,
Dick Laws's farm? Yeah.
which is out Spring Hill Road.
Do you suppose there's any place open enough now around here to actually have a fox hunt?
Yes.
Are there?
Yes. I mean, we go Y Island is one place we go, and there's a family named O'Neill that lives in there, Bethel. They got a lot of land, and they allow us to come there. So we aren't done. We're not done yet.
But development can certainly have an adverse effect on fox hunting.
Covering me up with condominiums.
Oh, yeah. There was a famous time back in the 70s when a good friend of yours by the name of Nutter Marvel
Oh, yeah.
brought his carriage collection, and here's some photographs of that occasion, including an Episcopal priest blessing of the hounds.
Yeah.
And, I don't know who that is.
He's got a carriage in there.
But then here's several pictures of his carriages. Is that collection still intact of Mr.
Pretty
Marvel's?
well. Pretty well. We were over there not too long ago, and a lot of it's been broken up, but it's pretty well intact.
And is that Georgetown, Delaware, or
Yes.
somewhere over there? Obviously a cold day that day, because there's people here with blankets wrapped around them, horse blankets, I guess.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your dear good friends, Bob Williams and Charlie Habliston.
Well, Bob Williams hunted with me from the beginning of the hunt till he died 2 weeks ago. How long was it? Just a year ago. And he and I were joint masters for years, and I miss him a great deal. He was always ready to go hunting, and he knew a lot about foxes and their habit, and he was a good man to have along on a hunt.
And he was your neighbor, I guess, of sorts, right at your back
his farm adjoined my farm.
Yeah. Charlie Habliston.
Died a year ago. About a year ago.
Now he was a neighbor of sorts. He lived down on the corner of Pemberton Drive and Nanticoke Road.
Right.
I shouldn't bring up Nanticoke Road.
You remember that? Didn't you?
Well, I will say this, that Miriam Hughes has forgiven me. She's now talking to me again. So
That's good.
So that was quite a step. And she said, I guess I like you too much. I'm gonna have to start talking to you again. But anyway, the corner of Nanticoke and Pemberton Drive was where Charlie Habliston's place was.
That's right.
That was a neat place. Had a barn out back. Now it is a McDonald's and a drugstore and a car wash, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
Which seems a shame, doesn't it?
Well,
But I guess
that's progress, they say.
yeah, progress of sorts. So between Bob Williams and you owned enough land almost to have a fox hunt.
Well, we did. And several neighbors joined us. Leigh Phillips used to hunt with us.
Oh yeah.
And Pratt Phillips owned land down there. Otis Asham.
Oh yeah, around Upper Ferry and down that
he
way.
owned a big tract there. So we always hunt on his property.
Yeah.
And so there weren't enough people to have a pretty sizable hunt.
Where did you get the foxes? Were they trapped?
God Almighty fixes them.
Well, once God Almighty gets it, how do you know where? Do you release a fox?
No.
Is that a no?
That's a no-no.
Oh. That's not sporting.
No, to drop a fox is a no-no. Your hounds are supposed to snuff around until they hear the scent. And when they hear the scent, then they do what we call, they open. You'd say bark. And so you got along in the woods, and first one hound will bark, and another one will join in, and another one join in, till you get the pack in full cry, all after the fox going away to wherever. But they get, the fox is there, and they get him up naturally.
I say. Well, all of the human beings, you have a master, which you were a master of the hunt. Is there a hierarchy among the dogs? Is there one lead dog, so to speak, or?
Well, all the dogs have personality. First place, we don't call them dogs; we call them hounds.
Hounds, excuse me.
Yeah,
excuse me. I beg your pardon. That's two mistakes I made right now.
And they have their characteristic. When I was hunting the hounds, I could tell when I heard a hound open which hound it was. There are a dozen recognized hunts in the state of Maryland, around the Baltimore area, Green Spring Valley Hunt and Elkridge Harford Hunt, and Marlboro Hunt. Their hunts have never shut down. They're Delabrook.
No, you mean they have a history that goes way back and a continual history.
Right.
Well, how about the history here? Is there a hunt club prior to the Wycomco hunt that we know today?
No. The Wycomco hunt started about 1935, and then it discontinued during World War II.
Mm-hmm. But it's still in existence today.
Oh yeah, they're hunting today.
Yeah, I think we have a picture which shows the officers of the hunt, which was you and Charlie Habliston and Bob Williams, but it also showed
Ann Fincher.
Mrs. Ann Fincher, who rode, and to this day is very interested in horses
Yeah.
and has a farm, and so she was an officer of.
Yeah, she was treasurer.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So that was the group that
That
got
was it.
things and kept things going.
Right.
Yeah. Let's try to investigate just a little bit the history of fox hunting. Where did it originate?
Well, originally it was just stag hunting. They were hunting deer, and then it was in England now, and they got fed up with stag hunting, and they got bored with stag hunting and took to fox hunting. In those days in England, the fox was considered to be a varmint, and you were encouraged to kill them. And then I guess it was the king, the royal family fox hunted,
Mm-hmm. And still do today.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And people wore the livery, the pink coats and so forth were the livery of the king, and they followed him, and wherever he went, they went, and they chased around wherever the fox took them.
And they used hounds.
Oh yeah.
So the early colonialists who came from England to the United States brought the tradition with them.
Right.
And some hounds as well.
Very much so.
Oh, and
Lafayette had hounds, and George Washington had hounds, and
so George Washington would go on.
a pack of hounds.
Oh,
Right.
and hunt fox.
Yeah. Very
And I
much
guess
so.
the fox was considered a good adversary because he was sly, the sly fox, so to speak. The idea is for the hounds to pick up the scent and finally find the fox. Is that the deal?
Bring him to bay.
Bring him to bay. Yeah. So that tradition goes all the way back to colonial times, and then, as you say, it was kind of a winter sport for a lot of farmers. They would have their own. They would have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 hounds or so themselves, and get their hounds.
They meet in some particular place, some church or somewhere, and cast their hounds, and you get together and have a big hunt.
And I guess it must be pretty thrilling when you sense that the hounds have picked up the scent, and then start off and you have to try to keep up with them.
Fox hunters love to hear hounds run, and they open, as we say, and that's music to their ears. And they even tell tales that the fox ran close to the Capitol in Washington, and they adjourned Congress for him to get into the hunt.
Well, maybe we would be better off today if some of our congressmen adjourned it and went fox hunting or something. Yeah. Well, it's been a great afternoon for talking about fox hunting with the master of the hunt, the Wycomco Hunt Club, Hamilton P. Fox